Robot Carnival is the answer to the question, what happens when you get a group of well-known Japanese animators and artists together and give them a homework assignment of, you can create anything you want, but there has to be a robot in it. It's a sometimes trippy, sometimes creepy, sometimes funny, sometimes thought-provoking, and always interesting viewing experience. Released in Japan in 1987, Robot Carnival is an anthology anime that's comprised of short films from different directors and animators, most of whom might be familiar to retro anime fans for the variety of other projects they've worked on. The only connection between each of the shorts, as mentioned before, is that they all contain some variation of robots in their theme.
The universe is our bathroom.
We deposit oil into the atmosphere when we get nervous. Standard robot protocol.
The bow tying all these together is some absolutely wonderful music from Mr. Japanese John Williams himself, Joe Hisashi, along with Isako Fujita and Masahashi Takechi. I first discovered it when I was in college. Some friends and I were discussing our taste in TV and films when the topic of anime came up. One of my friends asked if I had ever seen it, and the confused expression on my face told him that I'd never even heard of it. Soon enough, we were sitting in front of his early 2000s era Dell desktop computer firing up the obviously not pirated copy of the anthology film. Maybe it was the presence of certain herbal substances in my system, but an hour and 30 minutes later, the only thought I could muster was, I don't quite know what the fuck I just watched, but it was pretty awesome. Normally, I try to avoid recapping the entire plot of my video subjects, but considering the length of each of the short films involved in the anthology, I decided it's necessary to break that rule in order to really discuss my thoughts and opinions on the production as a whole. So, with that being said, there'll be nothing but spoilers from here on out, in as much as you can spoil 10-minute short stories with no sequels or expanding lore behind them anyway. If you've never seen it, I'll go ahead and skip to the part where I say I recommend watching it. Just having the chance to witness the various visual styles and themes makes it worth viewing at least once, and I wouldn't want to ruin that experience for anyone. If you're still with me, just know you have been warned. The opening title sequence of Robot Carnival was directed by anime legend Katsuhiro Otomo. Most obviously and famously known to anime fans as the creator of both the manga and film adaptations of Akira, but whose resume is really far too prolific to be covered in the context of this video. The intro sets the tone early and lets us know that we're in for a bizarre ride. It takes place in a desert, and we see a young boy comes across a poster advertising the Robot Carnival, stating it's coming soon. His reaction is not one of excitement, but panic. This is not a prelude to a joyous carnival of fun. He knows this is a prelude to destruction. He scrambles to warn his nearby desert village of what's coming. The titular Robot Carnival has arrived, and it's a rusted, powerful monstrosity that's fallen into disrepair, aimlessly barreling forward through the desert sands, laying waste to everything in its path. As it rolls forward, it crushes and kills the powerless villagers below, all while bellowing fanfare as fireworks and streamers dance in the sky above the victims of its haphazard onslaught. Robot ballerinas are sent descending from the sky like warplanes, dropping fire and death on those below. The whole situation is darkly comical. Imagine being one of these desperate people below that are doomed to horrific deaths as bombastic horns and artificial cheers of joy blare out above you. Or having one of these robot ballerinas slowly descend upon you with its off-putting grin, only to explode into a fireball of death right in your face. Pure nightmare fuel, but also quite hilarious. Soon enough, the monstrous carnival has finished rolling over the entire village and continues its aimless path through the desert, indifferent and oblivious to the destruction left in its wake. Welcome to Robot Carnival, folks. The first short is titled Franken's Gears from director Koji Morimoto. Morimoto had primarily worked as a freelance animator during his career up to this point, with Robot Carnival being his first time as a director. He would later work as an animator for Akira and contribute to several other anthology anime over the years, including Memories and The Animatrix. As the title might have suggested to you already, Franken's Gears is a robot-inspired take on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We bear witness to the efforts and struggles of a zany-looking mad scientist as he attempts to bring his robot creation to life by harnessing the power of a lightning storm. As he frantically runs about, turning wheels and gears, failure seems imminent as the equipment around him begins to shudder and collapse. After a few moments, however, the monstrous robot begins to move and its gears whir as it comes to life. It trains its sights on the old scientist, likely attempting to contemplate its own existence. In this vein, the robot begins to mimic every movement made by its creator. The scientist, now flooded with joy at his success, begins to dance around in celebration until he loses balance and falls to the ground. The copycat robot, still mimicking the actions of its creator, clumsily dances, trips, and then falls on top of the old scientist, crushing him and destroying everything around them in the process. There's a lot of things I like about this short film. The use of grays and browns against the dark backdrop of the scientist's workshop helped to give the setting a damp castle vibe that properly invokes a Frankenstein feeling to the story. The sound design is also wonderful, with the lack of dialogue and noise in general at times bringing weight to the clangs and crumbling sounds as the monster comes to life. The short manages to make the viewer grow a quick attachment to the scientist's creation, reminding us of what it's like to watch a child explore its surroundings for the first time, only to subvert that warm feeling with a bit of twisted dark comedy when the scientist is hilariously crushed as a result of the giant metal child's curiosity. I'm sure there's some kind of allegory buried in here about a parent's unconditional love and desire to teach their child about life resulting in their own destruction, but that's for someone more intelligent than me to decide and try to explain. The second story is titled Deprive and is directed by Hidetoshi Omori. Like Morimoto, Omori primarily worked in the industry as an animator and storyboarder, and he must have been a very busy man, seeing as how the list of projects he worked on over the years is longer than the list of times I embarrassed myself in high school. Deprive begins when a group of robot soldiers smash down into a cyberpunkian city and attack it. During the assault, the evil robots kidnap a young generic blue-haired anime girl. Her android companion is badly damaged by the attackers and is powerless to stop them. He's left clutching her locket as she's dragged away, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. We then cut to a young man with apparent superhuman capabilities chasing down and destroying the invading evil robots with his patented head-crushing technique.
Don't panic. I'm only crushing your heads. I'm crushing your head. I'm crushing your head.
Eventually, the young man is confronted by two much more powerful robots. He fights valiantly, but is ultimately incapacitated by the two mini-bosses. Now captured, he's brought before the leader of the evil robots, revealed to be David Bowie.
You remind me of the babe.
David Bowie here tortures our hero, who is suddenly revealed to be the girl's android companion from before, now with an upgraded combat model body. He battles the two mini-boss robots again, this time defeating them. Now evil David Bowie is forced to take matters into his own hands
Dance, magic, dance, magic, dance, magic, dance.
and unleashes a few powerful eyeball laser attacks. In the end, good ultimately triumphs over evil. Our android robot rescues generic blue-haired anime girl and they make their escape. As they make their way out, the girl sees that this android is carrying her locket. Recognizing now that this new model is actually her android companion from before, she's overjoyed and gives him a big old hug, sending him right back to the robot friend zone where he belongs. This is probably my second favorite segment of Robot Carnival, and it's not that difficult to explain why. The soundtrack is wonderfully synthy, the character design is within that peak 80s anime range that I personally find appealing, and there's plenty of action to go around. It's like an episode of Dragon Ball Z without all the bits where someone else explains the hero's fighting techniques for 90% of the runtime. Pure action and adventure with all the fat trimmed off. Next up is a change of pace in the form of a segment titled Presence, directed by Yasuomi Umetsu. Another artist whose career consists mostly of work as an animator and character designer for numerous anime, but also dabbled in doing some work as a character designer and some promotional art for several video games. Presence tells a story of an unassuming man whose relationship with his hardworking and successful wife is cold and ineffectual. For the first time in Robot Carnival, we're treated to some dialogue as the man provides some narration, explaining that he's almost jealous of his wife's success and apparent dominance in their relationship. It appears that his job is working as some sort of toy maker, as we see the inside of his workspace is filled with dolls and small mechanical spaceships and characters. It's here that he's also hiding something. He's secretly been creating a life-size, convincingly human-looking robot woman.
Why? You know why.
Apparently driven by his attempt to compensate for the lack of a loving relationship with his wife, the man activates the robot girl and they begin to talk. The inquisitive girl appears to be far more perceptive than the man had anticipated, as she can clearly sense his loneliness and eagerness to be loved, while he deflects and avoids the subject. It's at this point that she begins to hit a little too close to home, as sensing his need for it, the girl presses her body against his back and tries to bring herself close with him. Whether because he's in denial or frightened by the prospect of finally being presented with some form of the love that he craves, the man panics and decimates his creation with a large wrench, viciously attacking it and leaving it hunched over in the corner. The man then leaves, apparently never planning to return again.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
We flash forward a number of years into the future. The man, now elderly, sits on his front porch. His granddaughter and daughter exit the house, making their way home after a quick visit. After they leave, the man has visions of the robot woman he had smashed all those years ago.
Oh my.
Not smashed in that context, smashed in this context. Not sure if he was hallucinating, he makes his way to the old workshop only to find her body slumped against the wall, covered in cobwebs, just the way he left it. Reserved to chalk the whole thing up to his imagination, the man leaves. We flash forward yet again to a number of years even later. The man, now older, is again sitting on his front porch. As before, he's confronted with a vision of the robot woman. This time, however, she doesn't disappear. As they draw closer, the man eventually takes her hand, and then they walk away together. The man's wife walks outside just to catch a glimpse of them walking hand in hand before they disappear, leaving her in disbelief. This is another segment that I like. It's impressive just how much the creators managed to squeeze into this. Themes about gender roles, masculinity, loneliness, conformity, self-consciousness, all stuffed in with themes of sentience, love, acceptance, denial. It's pretty tightly packed considering the runtime. Visually, there's a lot to like as well. The man's workshop in particular reminds me a lot of J.F. Sebastian's home in Blade Runner, with all the small toy-like creations laying around. It shows a lack of maturity and extenuates his loneliness and isolation from true human affection, as he appears to kind of lock himself away here every day. In the end, because there's so much crammed in, it does feel a little rushed. Considering the intended runtime of each of the shorts, it's a forgivable criticism in the grand scheme of things. Next we come to probably my favorite short in Robot Carnival, Starlight Angel, directed by famed Zeta gunman character designer Hiroyuki Kitazume. The story begins with two teenage girls in a Disney-esque robot theme park. Our main character is this girl, whose joyful evening takes a turn when she discovers that the guy she's been seeing ends up exposing himself as a two-timer who's been seeing her friend on the side.
You son of a bitch!
Distraught, the girl runs away in tears, running into one of the park's robots and dropping her locket. The robot is obviously infatuated with the young woman, grabs the locket, and attempts to chase her down to return it. Eventually, the girl makes her way into a virtual reality dark ride. For a few moments inside, she's calmed by the wondrous colors and scenery around her, however, seeming to feed off of the negative memories of this piece of shit.
You son of a bitch!
The ride suddenly takes a sinister turn and spawns a giant laser-shooting mecha kaiju thing. Enter our hero, the park robot from before. He finds the young girl in peril. Through his valiant efforts to save her, he's actually revealed to be a human, one of the theme park's employees that's been dressed in a robot costume. After a little back and forth, eventually the girl accepts that he's trying to help her, and they make their escape from the clutches of the monster that was manifested inside of the dark ride. When this is all over, she waits outside the park for her new handsome companion, just so she can show him off to the girl that stole her boyfriend before. As I said before, this is my favorite part of Robot Carnival. I wouldn't say it's the best from a technical standpoint or anything like that, I just personally love it. The reason for that might sound strange, but Starlight Angel makes me feel kind of nostalgic for a place that I've obviously never been to because it's not a real place. However, a place I have been is Disney World. And the setting of the story brings me back to some very early and fuzzy memories I have locked away in the back of my brain. You see, when I was a kid in the late 80s, like pre-kindergarten age, my family lived in Orlando, Florida based on a relocation of my father's job. So we spent a decent amount of time going to Disney. I don't remember a whole lot about those trips, just bits and pieces really. I remember loving going on the Dumbo ride with my mother, but being terrified of the height when the ride car rose up into the air. I also remember being terrified by Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. But the most vivid memory I have was probably watching the Electric Light Parade at night. It felt magical as a kid, with the color of the lights painting everything around in bluish and orangish hues with an occasional explosion of reds, greens, pinks, and so on. The theme park in Starlight Angel is very obviously inspired by the Magic Kingdom mixed with Epcot Center as they appeared in the 80s, so it draws me right back to those memories every time I watch it. On top of that, the character designs are lovely, the story is wonderfully stupid, and of course there's plenty of solid flying robot laser fighting action. The cherry on top, of course, being yet some more fantastic music. Just aces all around. The next segment is called Cloud, directed by Manabu Ohashi, under his pen name Mao Lando. Ohashi, known for his work as a key animator on Cyborg 009, Go-Go 13, Venus Wars, and many other anime over his long career, provides us with the most unique artistic outing of Robot Carnival. Cloud is simple. We see a robot walking and sometimes stumbling throughout time. In the background, the animation of the clouds changes over time and depicts the stages of human evolution and destruction. And that's pretty much it. I can't say that I particularly enjoy Cloud, but I do appreciate it as art. With all of the other shorts pretty much following along a standard pattern for most anime, I give credit to this one for doing something a little different. It's like a painting that's come to life. It's calming to watch, even though there's a certain level of anxiety to what our little robot friend is experiencing. There's really not much more I can think to say about it, other than to say that all in all, it's a unique and interesting work of art that's sandwiched in between some more typical anime fare. Up next is a short titled Strange Tales of Meiji Machine Culture Westerners Invasion, which is a mouthful, although not quite a mouthful when you compare that to some more modern anime titles.
What the hell is even that?
It's directed by Hiroyuki Kitakubo, who is mostly known for his work in animation and screenwriting. He began his career in anime at a young age working on Mobile Suit Gundam. His directorial debut wouldn't come in Robot Carnival, as we've seen is the case with some of the other creators that worked on this anthology. His directing gig actually came in an episode of the exotic anime Cream Lemon.
Oh my.
Easy recycle jokes aside, he also worked on a number of films throughout his career, including Akira, which you've probably noticed is a bit of a theme with the creators that worked on Robot Carnival. What we have here, for all intents and purposes, is a parody of the iconic super robot genre popularized in the 70s by shows like Voltes 5 and Beast King Go Lion, or Voltron to Americans like me. It even includes a 5-member Sentai team to operate the hero robot. The twist here is that instead of the typical high-tech sci-fi setting with space alloys, lasers, missiles, and so forth, this short takes place in Japan's Meiji era. So instead we get steam and coal-powered robots made from steel and wood. This is also the second and last segment of Robot Carnival to contain any form of dialogue. The story is simple enough on the surface. A giant menacing robot suddenly appears and invades a coastal Japanese town, piloted by a pompous, loud, egomaniacal Westerner. American. At one point, there's even a joke in which one of the Sentai team members is attempting to translate the wild ramblings of their attacker and says he'd be able to understand them more easily if they were speaking English, but unfortunately they don't have much experience with American. The 5 Japanese youths
Did you say Utes?
that are our main heroes have constructed a giant robot of their own. While it doesn't appear to have been created with combat in mind, they take it upon themselves to defend their town against the Americans' assault. The ensuing battle is littered with slapstick humor and collateral damage, much to the annoyance of the town's citizens. In the end, the Americans' attack is repelled and he's left retreating into the ocean, adrift on what remains of his war machine, rambling his threats to return and get revenge. This is probably the most lighthearted entry, and I rather enjoy it for that reason. I could easily see these characters spun off into their own Super Sentai show and can imagine the goofy shenanigans they'd get up to. Even if those shenanigans would be inherently funnier if I had a better understanding of Japanese culture and their view towards Western influence on their society in the 80s. So Japanese cultural shenanigans, I suppose.
I swear to God, I'll pistol whip the next guy that says shenanigans.
It isn't hard to see that there's some negative feelings being portrayed here, so much so that the American release of Robot Carnival saw some changes to this short to lessen its not so thinly veiled anti-American theme. So in the end, the negative feelings didn't quite run deep enough to turn down a little extra profit from the West. Our final short is titled Chicken Man and Redneck. And whatever you're thinking it'll be about based on that title, you're probably wrong. This is directed by Takashi Nakamura, the prolific animator and artist that worked on several legendary anime including Akira, again, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and the most legendary of all, the 1996 Sonic the Hedgehog OVA. In Chicken Man and Redneck, a robot wizard uses their magic to turn all the machinery in Tokyo into robots who come to life. During the mayhem, there's only one drunk human still awake to witness it. According to the internet, this drunk man is the titular Chicken Man himself. From here on out, it's just a whole bunch of craziness, with poor Chicken Man doing his best to get away from all the robots and just survive, really. Just as the madness seems to reach its peak, morning arrives and the robots disappear. Everything seems to have returned to normal. Only then, the best way I can describe Chicken Man and Redneck is a colorful explosion of what the fuckness. It's weird, fun, unnerving, confusing, and humorous all at once. It's like a fever dream occurring in the mind of a man that spends most of their free time fearing the coming AI apocalypse. There isn't too much to make sense of here, and that's kind of the point. The whole short is Nakamura just showing off his animation and design skills, with everything else being an afterthought. I guess that means I love it. Or I'm afraid of it. 20 years later from first watching it, I'm still not 100% sure. And that brings us to the end. Overall, Robot Carnival might not be your kind of thing. Generally, I prefer feature-length films or ongoing series when I watch anime, but I think it'd be a disservice to the genre to ignore that there are some great anthologies out there, and this is certainly one of them. If I wanted to take the time to go in and individually nitpick the things that work and don't work with each of the shorts, I could probably be here all day. That's not really the point of this. I think in the end, this is something that deserves to be remembered and watched, and not just left to roll aimlessly in the desert, wasting away, and forgotten.
I've seen things you people wouldn't